Once upon a time there were two sisters, Sylvie and Jeanne, both for whom fashion was a great love. At the age of 18, the sisters opened their boutique under the name of the Boué Soeurs.
It's Boué, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, mademoiselle.
It's Madame to you.
Yes, sorry. So the sisters opened their boutique at 9 Rue de la Paix, and after a number of years having great success in Paris, they decided to jump the pond and move their store to New York in 1914. And this is where we find them, the Boué Soeurs. On the cusp of creating the stunning 1920s gowns which would have made them as famous as Coco Channel, had they not have gone bust in the 1950s. Sorry, girls.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you liked that little introduction. It was certainly quite fun to film with my sister. Today we are going to be looking at the French fashion house. This comes as video number 2 in my collection of videos that I'm doing on the 1920s fashion, and basically looking at anything that I'm interested in to do with the 1920s, be that illustration, artists, fashion houses, and also anything that interests you. So if you have any ideas, please could you put them in the comments so that I know kind of what ideas you have and what you'd be interested in seeing. That would really help me out. If this sounds basically like anything that you would be interested in watching to do with the 1920s, if that's kind of your thing, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like this video so that you can keep up to date with what I'm doing. And if you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing even more on the daily, then you can go and follow my 1920s fashion Instagram page, which is called the real_West_egg, like the Great Gatsby, where he lived, like where Gatsby lives in West Egg. Yeah, got there in the end. As I said in the introduction, we're two French sisters who decided to make their own fashion house together. But according to an article that Jeanne wrote for the Arts and Decoration magazine in 1922, the two sisters had actually been making clothes for their dollies from a very young age. Under the name of the Boué Soeurs, the two sisters opened up their first boutique in Paris, in Rue de la Paix, in 1899. But because there aren't very many clothes kind of existing from this time period, we mainly associate their designs with the 1920s. So after their initial success in Paris, they then decided to open a store up in New York in 1914. However, there was some tantalising, scandalous details surrounding this move. In 1915, the year after they moved to New York, they were done for tax evasion because they tried to smuggle around 100 of their dresses into the United States without paying their taxes. And if this wasn't enough, they also tried to get their workers in from France without having their proper immigration documents finished. For these crimes, the sisters were supposed to spend one night in jail, but after some persuasion, no, I'm kidding, I actually have no idea what happened, but basically they didn't have to stay a night in jail, they just stayed a night in a police office instead. The garments made by the Boué Soeurs sisters were definitely catered to a more elite audience. Due to the kind of embellishment and the silks and the very expensive materials they used, the garments could cost quite a lot, and then on top of that they would each kind of take about 3 days to make. So you can imagine these were quite pricey items. It's been estimated that some of the Boué Soeurs dresses went for around $2,000, which in today's currency actually kind of adds up to around $25,000, which is a lot for a dress. And then of course you would have to buy all of the undergarments, shoes, shawls, everything to go with it. It would be a very pricey kind of look to go for. So for this they needed not only an expertly run design team as led by Jeanne, but they also needed kind of a business savvy outlook as ran by Sylvie. The sisters definitely preferred a more traditionally feminine look, and this was achieved in part by the fabrics that they chose to use. Often the underlays of their dresses would be made from silk, and they chose to do it in a very light colour so that it would look from afar as though the wearer was being nude, with kind of these embroidered details and roses over the top. This silk layer would always have kind of a layer of chiffon, lace, tulle, or lace that was specifically their in-house made lace called Filet Boué. So the reason that they actually included this second layer of tulle or lace was so that they could heavily embellish a lot on the top. Often they would use metallic threads or textiles, which they would have to specially buy from textile and theatrical designers, because it was very uncommon for these kind of textiles to be available at the time. Another common embellishment that they used was the silk handmade rosebuds that they would then sew in over the top, and these kind of roses have their roots in Rococo's kind of like Marie Antoinette style clothing. The key though was to keep everything very lightweight. They would never, for example, have a dress that was so weighed down by its embellishments that it detracted from this kind of whipped up cream sort of look that they had going, which is kind of signature of their style. Okay, so now I thought we could move on to look at some actual garments from the Boué Soeurs. All of the pictures that I'm using have come from the Met website. So the first item that we are going to look at is this beautiful and very delicate camisole, which according to the Met site was dated from the early 1920s. If you had watched my previous video, you would know that I talked briefly about the undergarments that were worn by women at the time, and it was becoming increasingly common for women to actually kind of toss out these Victorian corsets in favour of bandeaus or camisoles such as this one. Now, I chose this garment specifically because it's a really good example of the Filet Boué lace that I was talking about earlier. You can really see it, and you can also see the tiny silk roses that would go on the top, the little buds that they made specifically. It's a really good example of this, and it's going to be a very common theme in all of the items that we are going to be looking at. Moving on, we then go on to one of my actual favourite dresses that the Boué Soeurs produces. Why did I say produces in a French accent? Sorry about that. Anyway, this is one of my favourite, and it's the 1928 court ensemble dress. So this dress would have actually been used for a debutante at her coming out ball, which is a tradition we have, I think, fortunately left behind. This dress is in a robe de style style of dress, which was popularised in the early 1920s by Jeanne Lanvin. It incorporates the dropped waist style, which is kind of typical of the 1920s, but it also have these little hip panniers that come out the side, which create this big hipped illusion, and they're basically kind of like these little baskets, wire baskets that come out of the hips. I actually wrote an entire Instagram post on this particular dress because it's one of my favourites and I love it, so if you guys want to check that out, my Instagram name will be on the screen. And finally, we're going to end by looking at these super Rococo inspired little silk slippers. This design features kind of a very short block heel and is covered in a light coloured silk with, again, the signature lace and the tiny little silk flowers all over. To me, these really wouldn't look out of place at all in Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette, one of my favourite films for looking at costume. So obviously these are all garments that were made in the 1920s, but the Boué Soeurs fashion house actually continued making clothing for a smaller clientele up until the outbreak of the Second World War. After the Second World War, they did reopen their shop in New York. I don't think Paris though, but they had kind of lost a lot of popularity because the robe de style and this very feminine and lacy look that they were going for wasn't really within the modern look that women were then embracing. So unfortunately, they then had to close their doors in the 1950s. Right guys, that's unfortunately the end of this quite short video on the Boué Soeurs. If you loved this video, or you at least liked it, please could you subscribe and like the video. It would help me out a lot. Also, please let me know your opinions on the dresses that we've looked at today, and if you want to have a little bit more of a look, in the description box I will have put all of the resources that I looked at to kind of make this video, and also I have linked the Met website, which is where I got the pictures from. The Met actually had an exhibition which featured a lot of the Boué Soeurs dresses, so they are a really great resource to look at. I've absolutely loved my time chatting with you today, and I hope you have enjoyed learning about something a little bit different. I feel like the Boué Soeurs are not a super well-known designer, you know, they're not like Jeanne Lanvin or Artie. It's kind of not exactly underground, but it's a little bit different, and I love their designs. They're super feminine, super floral, and very lacy. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll speak to you soon.
Ugh.